Is it live, is it? Okay. What's ga? Le Noir. So, ladies and gents, you have been very patient with me with these particular videos where I try and talk about something that you can't talk about, that you can't put in words, that it is known you can't put into words, it's impossible to put it in words, and but people seem to be getting something from it. So I wanted to add something that was something that I wanted to bring up in the last video, and then I didn't want to drivel on for too long, because driveling on for long periods of time is something I'm very skilled at. I like to stay within inside my skill set. People have asked me time and again about meditation, Zen meditation, and Eckhart Tolle, and they've expressed like some frustration around trying to work with some of those concepts. And I'm interested in the ways in which sometimes, you know, when you say a concept or you say something that's helpful to you, I hear it in my head and I turn it into something else. And it's no longer useful for me. When Eckhart Tolle is talking about being in the now, the language, the linguistics of that are so vague, and I'm not implying that he's being artfully vague. I think that's what he genuinely experiences it as. That there are implications and nuance to that people, particularly people with CPTSD, can't get. And without wanting to add thread drift to this, I have noticed for people on a sliding scale of like the complex post-traumatic stress response, the higher up the scale they are for intensity of symptoms, the less tolerance there is for stuff that is not very, very literal. So that if it's not just a very, very simple and straightforward explanation of exactly what's happening, then people generally get a bit frustrated with it. And I think when people are frustrated with Eckhart Tolle, that's why, is because it's too vague and requires this sort of nuanced understanding of what he's saying. And there's also layers of implication there that he doesn't explain and doesn't get into. And then there's things that I think people who were raised in non-traumatic environments, there are just hurdles that they don't have to get over. So I've also found listening to Eckhart Tolle sometimes frustrating, and you know, my own experiences with I was doing Zen meditation at the Komyokan dojo with Ezra Sensei when I was 15 years old, and he is recognized globally as one of the best Aikido and Zen instructors in Europe. I was very, very lucky, and I was like immersed in studying Japanese culture, Aikido and Zen, and the roots of Zen meditation. And I had people there who were experienced who I could ask, and I still found it infuriatingly frustrating to try and pin down exactly what the hell was going on. So a non-nuanced, a non-vague explanation, or an explanation perhaps because an explanation that doesn't rely too much on implication, I think is necessary. When I'm listening to Mr. Tolle talk, I think what you can do is you can imagine for a moment you're a therapist or a coach. Sometimes you listen to what the client is saying, and you can take their words literally. You can take first level communication from what they've told you. The example I've frequently used is because of when this sort of realization hit me is, I love my father and I'm not afraid of him, says the client. But every single piece of data that they've given you up until that point indicates that they might love or feel some sort of loyalty towards their father, but they clearly fear him. They clearly are full of fear for him. Which communication should you listen to? Should you listen to the content-based words, or should you listen to the way in which they're talking about the subject? And in this way, we can find out what the client's unconscious beliefs are. Sounds kind of mystical and spooky and superpower-ish, but no, you just listen to how they're talking about the subject, and therefore they're going to reveal how they think, how they feel, and how they act will be indicated. Will give us a better indication of what is really going on than what they say. Similarly with yourself, like if you notice that you have like an ideology or a narrative or a set of beliefs in your head, but you act differently to them, then the thing that is more true for you is the thing that you're acting, not the thing that you're saying. Louis C.K. did a good little bit about believies and having these things called beliefs, these believies, which are in his skit were like these little posturing bits of narcissistic frivolity and bits of vanity about what we, and I believe blah, blah, blah. And I have all these believies and I live by none of them. So there's a narrative and then there's the truth. So when I looked at Eckhart Tolle's work, I was like, okay, I think this highly intelligent, which is one issue, like he's really high IQ, and highly intellectual, and I mean cerebral. He's an academic. He's he's flipping English literature and something else from Cambridge University. Like when he had his revelation, it was on a bench in between studying at Cambridge. The guy's no dummy. Like he's really clever. And so that gives an certain advantages, certain disadvantages, and a certain structure. But when you analyze, or when I've analyzed what he's saying, for rather than just the content of what he's saying, but what he seems to mean is he finds safety and a sensation of security and a sensation of peace physically in the body, in his body, when he does an experience of being in the moment, when he accepts the experience of being here now, which is possible for him, I presume, because he doesn't have long-term trauma that makes his body a dangerous place to be. When we're talking about trauma and trying to heal from trauma, this has been the major problem of shamans, healers, witches, and then doctors throughout the history of human consciousness. Like that's what healers have to do. They have to heal trauma that is physical and sometimes it's psychological. In days gone by, most cultures recognize that trauma caused, and I'll use their language, their map of reality, the spirit to leave the body. A fright, a shock, a sudden, overwhelming event causes the spirit, what's that? Consciousness, awareness, the soul maybe, depending on what you believe, to try and escape the physical danger that is present and the psychological and emotional danger that's present. And sometimes the shock, the adrenaline is just too much. So the spirit tries to leave. It's not a bad metaphor. It's not a dreadful metaphor for what goes on, because we know that many systems of therapeutic intervention that work with bringing the person back into the body work pretty well. People have had, this is published research, people have had tremendous results doing fairly basic yoga type exercises and yoga type meditations with people with combat related PTSD. There's a guy called Richard who developed a system in the early 2000s called I-Rest, I-Rest. And it's actually been, I think it was reviewed and accepted by the American military. I think it's one of the few American military rubber-stamped external contractor methodologies for dealing with PTSD, and it's had pretty consistent results. You can download the ebook on your Kindle. It's very sensible stuff, but it's not much goes on in principle other than asking the individual to permit themselves to come back to the body and to come back to the moment. So the body is always in the moment. It can't go anywhere else. The body's stuck in time. The body's just like here. The body's stuck. It can't go into the past. It can't go into the future. Only the mind can go into the past and the future. Only the consciousness can go into the past and the future. So only the spirit can go into the past and the future. We can jump forward into the future or go back into the past as a response to trauma, or we can lose ourselves in fantasy. The body doesn't have that option. The body gets left behind. Somebody else wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. So the poor body is just getting left behind, but it's still keeping the score. Some clever person in the comments will tell me who wrote that. I have an idea. I think it's a Dutch name. It's at the edge of my consciousness, but I can't get it right now. And so when Eckhart Tolle is talking, and when a lot of people in that field are talking, I think what they're pointing towards is a sort of yoga-esque experience. And yoga in the purest sense. Yoga, our language, English, is a Proto-Indo-European language. It has Indian roots. Fascinating. It has Sanskrit. Dosk is a Sanskrit word. Yoke is a Sanskrit word, or it's the same etymological root. Yoga and yoke, as in a yoke, when something is yoked to something else, it means it's joined to it. So yoga is like a unification, is a joining of body and mind in the moment. What was Aikido all about? Aikido was Morihei Ueshiba Sensei's attempt to unify chi, Aikido, harmony, energy, way. It sounds mystical and it sounds a bit woo and it's weird and it's exotic, but it wasn't really. He was a pretty, his whole approach was pretty primal and pretty like farmerish. He was like, if you move your body and your breath and your intent at the same time, good shit will happen. He didn't say that. That's not a quote from Ueshiba Sensei, but he said things like that. He pointed towards that. And all the exercises and that you do are in that vein. I think there's a physical component that is missing from Eckhart Tolle's work because he's not a very physical dude. And I think he doesn't think it's necessary because it wasn't really necessary for him. But for people who are hyper-adrenalized, for people whose HPA axis is dysregulated, whose capacity to regulate their own emotions and to perceive things with clarity has been damaged at the biological level, physical work is necessary because the mind and the body need to be brought back together. They need to be yogied. They need to be re-yoked because they're not yoked. They're unyoked. They're unyogied. So they need yogifying. Not that you need to get to any particular high level. You could do a basic qigong exercise and find it useful. There's a great one from Tai Chi, a basic Tai Chi warm-up. You raise your hands up in front of you as you breathe in. You take them to the top at the top of your breath, and then as you slowly let your breath out, your hands float downward. You do that 10 times. Really, really simple exercise. Both hands up to breathe in. Both hands down to breathe out. Don't need any, you don't need any special outfit. You can wear silk pajamas if you like. You can wear tight-fitting yoga pants if you want to, but you don't need to. It's not really necessary, but it actually can bring you back. The unification of body movement. Ueshiba Sensei, the guy who created Aikido, was big on breath, intent, and movement. Breath, intent, and movement was really, really important for him. So I think what Mr. Tolle is pointing to is something fantastic and something that everybody would really benefit from. But because it's almost like he's talking past people with the CPTSR, they just get frustrated and go, what the fuck is this guy on about? There is a capacity to feel safe in the moment without the story. There's a capacity to hide out, to be encamped, to feel comforted and to rest in the moment. To rest in the moment, to be here, to be present, to be in the body, to be in this very moment, and to just chill here and go, this is okay. And he says that. He says, if you're fighting with reality, you're going to lose. If you're constantly saying no, you're going to lose. But if you're in this moment and you're right here and you're in this room, which wasn't the same room you were in last week or last year, but it's still a room and it's basically okay. Like this moment is basically okay. So the animal element of you, the body side of you is here and it goes, it's all right here actually, now. Then the mind will go, oh, but in the future it might be dangerous. And in the past it was dangerous. And then it plays films. It plays stories. It plays stories to itself. It's kind of a masturbatory machination. Here's some stories that I created for you about the future that's terrifying. Thank you very much, brain. Here's some terrible stories from the past that I've re-edited to make them even worse than they really were. Thank you very much, brain. Thanks for playing them. But right here, right now, everything is okay. And so there can be a feeling of safety within the storylessness of the moment. Because there's no real strivingness here. There's no real strife in the moment unless something terrible is happening. And terrible things, when they happen, tend to be brief. They tend to just happen and then go away. And usually we can either avoid the terribleness if we're present, or if we can't avoid it, it's less terrible if we're present. Bad times are not as bad when you're present. Good times are even better when you're present. There isn't really a downside to being present. There's a hell of a downside. Bessel van der Kolk wrote The Body Keeps the Score. Thank you. The downside to not being present is you're not really alive. You're not really living. Some clever person once said, healing only takes place in the present moment. Healing can only take place in the present moment. So you can actually only heal. Which, if you take that old mystical view again and say, okay, what do I need for my body, my brain, and my emotional body to heal? Well, I would need the spirit to be in the body. I'd need I-ki. I'd need breath, intent, and movement within a certain direction in the body now. I'd need yoga. I'd need body and brain and soul in the same movement direction now, here and now, present. I can't do that if my soul is over there or floating around on the ceiling having a wank, thinking about something else some other time. It needs to be here. It needs to be present now. Not engaged in the movies and the stories that pop up and that create for us. My final point on this, of opening the door to maybe, people experimenting with the possibility of engaging with themselves physically and mentally, and of opening the opportunity to feel safe in the present, is to reassert an insistence that you're going to hear from me a lot, that being lost in story is not good. Being lost in time is really not good. It actually makes your will weaken. It weakens your body, it weakens your brain, and it weakens the emotional body as well. Because you're never present to do any of the housework. You're an absentee landlord. You're never here. You're only here for like a few seconds, and then your body goes, oh, the spirit's in the body, okay, do some healing. Oh, he's gone. No, sorry, he's gone. He's fucked off again. And that the tech and the social media is all about getting you further into story. When you scroll, you are not present. When you are looking at other people's stories and comparing them to the size of your story, oh, is it bigger than yours? Ooh. You're also not present because it's not real. None of it's real. It's just glowing pixels. You're being caught up in something that isn't real. It's not here. The only thing that's real is this. This. And you could go, I don't like this. And it's like, well, So it's still real. It's still what's real now. It's still what's real for this moment. This is what it is. Somebody asked me about social media the other day, and I realized I went into a fire and brimstone style speech about how toxic it was, and I think I really, really put them off. So I'm going to have to find a way of answering that question that doesn't freak people out. I do think that there is a conspiracy at play. I do think that there's nothing less than human consciousness that's at stake. But even being that paranoid, as I am, which I think is a realistic level of paranoia, because I think the threat is that big and I think it's of that nature, I think even the human entities, the singular points of consciousness, are engaged in that conspiracy. Even they don't know how bad it is. They know that what they're doing is wrong. They've openly admitted it. But even they don't know what the cost will be. And it will play out, I think, in the next few years, what the cost will be. That's not the sickness. That's a manifestation of a sickness. That's a symptom. The overuse of technology and being lost in social media. And, you know, look at the words they use. Status obsessed, status anxiety, timelines. They want you in your timeline, and stories. Now even YouTube has fucking stories. Now everything has fucking stories. But the true cost of that, I think, we're not going to really know what that is for a while yet. So the remedy to that sickness, to that infection, is present momentedness. And I'm pretty hopeful, because I think what's going to happen is I think that people are going to emerge from the tech and social media mental health nightmare knowing that it's made them really, really sick. There'll be like a group of kids that you let play video games 24/7 for 6 days straight. They're going to emerge from the darkness, sweating and acnified, twitching, going, oh, that actually doesn't feel very good anymore. I think the capacity to continuously deliver dopamine hits to people, I think it will probably burn out. I think that circuitry will burn out. So I'm pretty hopeful with that one. Okay, I'm not going to stay on for too long. I've been talking for 22 minutes and 40 seconds. I'll stay on for another 7 minutes. If anybody has any questions, now would be a good time to ask them. Please make them one sentence long and make sure they end in a question mark, which is that squiggly thing with the dot underneath it. Have you played Prince of Persia? No. Mariana Menendez says, leave at 44 seconds. Manuela B, so what yoga would you recommend and where? Just find a yoga school and give it a go. Valerie B says, dissociating. Yes, the type of thing I'm talking about is manifested as dissociation. So if you're not in the present moment and you're obsessed with trying to escape it, then you might be very, very deep into dissociation. Oh, I can't see anybody's comments. Ah, there they are. Can someone be black and white logical thinker and have neuroplasticity? I think you're confusing two concepts there. Black and white thinking usually refers to people who've developed a traumatic way of thinking about things that is very, very stiff, that is very binary, that creates a lot of false dichotomies. You're either all the way over here or all the way over there. So that's a trauma-based response. Neuroplasticity just means the extent to which the brain has plasticity, to which it is capable of movement and adaptation and change. Well, the comments keep disappearing. Do you think food and what we eat has connection with mental health? I do. I think people should be very careful with what they're eating. Question. I've done the SIC course to great effect. Well done. It's not an easy course to do. However, I got a surprise flashback yesterday. Waning now after 24 hours, thankfully. Once a flashback is kicked off, is it possible to rein it in? It is. But you need to have a very, very strong relationship with yourself. If a good dose of a flashback is kicked in, you need to have a good, strong relationship with yourself. And I wouldn't try and switch it off. I would almost try and redirect it. So I'd go, okay, what is and identifying it during the flashback wouldn't be fighting it. So you go, oh, Jesus, this is a fight flashback. This is a fawning flashback. This is a freezing flashback. Wowie. Okay, this is a good, strong one. Your emotional literacy is really going to help you. So what I recommend, Angela, is you go back to, if you think there was an incident, explore the incident using the emotional literacy exercise. If you think there was a series of things that has led to this, let's look at what was behind the emotional flashback, what caused it, where's it coming from, and what was the nature of the flashback, which of the 4 F's did it fall into, and what did it, when you had your set of circumstances, then you had your response and the correlation between the two. Write this down, take out a pen and a piece of paper, take the time out to, spend 45 minutes, an hour on it, and just map it out and just look at it. Just go, okay, what's here? What is it that I'm seeing here? What is the correlation between the event yesterday and my intense emotional response to this? And work it through as you would, any other emotional literacy exercise. What are all the emotions you feel around it? What is that cluster of emotions? Does it remind you of anything? Is this just like that situation with your mum when you were 15? Is it, or is it because, God damn it, something about unfairness seems to really set me off? Like, I notice I get set off by unfairness, and I can have a disproportionate response to situations where there's like a dereliction of duty kind of thing. So somebody's profiting, and the people they're profiting from, they've just kind of let the people that they've profited from they've just kind of basically abandoned them, kind of thing. So it's good for you to know in yourself. Like, don't think of it as being an either or. This is all good data for you in your own personal development and growth over time. And it's, don't hate it. It's just, it is what it is, and it's there for the time being. What advice do you have for someone who undereats unintentionally as a coping mechanism for trauma? I'd look at what's behind the undereating. Are you hyperadrenalized? When you're having a traumatic response, is your heart rate going up? Some people, they have such a strong flight response that they actually elevate unwittingly. The body responds by unwittingly elevating their own endogenous drugs, including really powerful things that are not that different to speed and meth, that are just created in the body, like what's it called? Is it neuroepinephrine or just epinephrine? I can't remember. One of the names is when it's external, one is when it's created for itself. But it's really powerful, really powerful. Like, your body and your brain, the wonderful evolutionary machine that we have, can go, okay, this is crisis. The invaders have come. Don't eat, run and kill until the invaders are all gone. And your sex drive will plummet, your desire to eat will plummet, and then you won't need to sleep. You'll be like a super soldier. Great, thank you, body. That's really fantastic. I'm very happy that I'm working and that these things function. But there's no invaders right now. There's nothing for me to run from. There's nothing for me to kill. So it's actually not that useful for me to be flooded with neuroepinephrine right now. So let's just look at where this is coming from and then treat it as an emotional flashback. Use the CPTSD or CPTSR model. Treat it as an emotional flashback and treat the emotional flashback. And rather than focusing on the food, on the appetite, because that's just a symptom. Some people go the other way. Myself, I go the other way. Like, if I'm getting a lot of if I'm struggling, then there are different hormones and neurotransmitters that release in different people that do different things. I seem to get a lot more hungry. I seem to get a lot more ghrelin kicking off. I don't go the way of the norepinephrine. I go the other way, and then I want to eat a lot. So but it's not really about the food. The food is secondary to what's going on with your body, what's going on hormonally, and that's secondary to the root cause, which is trauma. It's a traumatic response. Do our thoughts influence others to comply with our own vision? They can do. I think there's less danger than people think with ketamine and psychedelics. That's interesting. Elizabeth says, have you experienced most narcissists as black and white thinkers? Well, depending on who you talk to and what what the model is, some people would say that really you would need to see black and white thinking for it to be narcissism. You would need to see the key symptomatic elements of post-traumatic response for it to be a narcissistic personality disorder. They would insist on that. And if black and white thinking wasn't there, if the capacity to reason flexibly was there on multiple subjects across multiple contexts, then some people would say, they would question whether it's a full-blown personality disorder. You've got to remember, NPD is absolutely a complex post-traumatic response. In a lot of the published literature, however, black and white thinking and other PTSD type responses, of which black and white thinking would be one, is usually associated only with borderline personality disorder. But as I said, it depends on the researcher. Can you please distinguish the difference in sensation between being in your head and being fully in your body? No? Do you mean for me? Or for everyone? I can't put into words how it feels inside my body when I'm in my body rather than just in my head. I'll try it. It's nice. Feels better. Like if you're in your head a lot, that can feel sort of numb, a lot of blocked energy and a bit frustrated, and the body would feel more like more switched on, more free, faster. There's the quick and the dead. Apparently quick used to mean alive. It didn't mean fast. So the quick and the dead just means the dead and the alive. But quick was associated with aliveness. So quicksilver is not quicksilver because it's fast. It moves quickly. It's quicksilver because it appears to be quick. Quick is alive. It appears like it's alive. So if you're in your body, you're quick. And if you're in your head, then you're dead. Dead energy. What are ways that dissociation can manifest itself? Well, anything that looks like you not being present, anything at all, dissociation, daydreaming, all the manifestations of daydreaming, all the manifestations of not being here. There are new diagnoses now. I had one a couple of months ago that was something daydreaming disorder. And I was like, why have they given it a new name? It's just dissociation. We've already got a word for this. We don't need more words. Anything that's not associated. If you're associated, you're present. If you're disassociated, then you're no longer present. How can one disarm a narc woman? What, is she working for a drug cartel? Lol. When there's a baby involved and she blackmails through the baby. I don't know. I think, like, if you're looking to, if somebody is using a child as blackmail, and you're saying, how do we disarm that? I mean, do you think I can give you through words in a YouTube video a magical formula that will make reality not be what it is. Because if you do, I have some rather bad news for you. It doesn't work like that. When I did a seminar recently with Sam Vaknin, and I'll be releasing that video, plus a bunch of extra stuff will be available to buy from SpartanLifeCoach.com in the next week. The seminar was called How to Manipulate a Psychopath, but we did how to manipulate any abusive partner in the cluster B spectrum. And one of the things that I insisted on was that people who have a tendency towards codependency realize and accept the power dynamic of the situation. We have a tendency to be somewhat power blind. Like, we don't want to see the truth of a situation, and we can dissociate and withdraw into a fantasy-based way of dealing with the situation. If you are in prison and you have a prison warden that you don't get on with, it behooves you to accept that you're in a bad power dynamic. Like, anything you do moving forward, if you don't accept the bad power dynamic or you try and ignore it, it's going to be worse for you than if you strategize from the point of view that you've accepted the power dynamic. So when a human being, particularly a female human being, makes another human with their body, in the eyes of the law, commonly understood morality and philosophy, that child is, up to a certain age, her property. Yes, there are manipulative people who would, with no moral boundaries, will do terrible things to leverage their power in a situation. Yes, they will use other humans as chess pieces. Yes, even innocent children, they'll use them as chess pieces. That happens. We've got to get that philosophically through our heads first, rather than be looking for any kind of a quick fix. It's a situation that needs to be dealt with very, very carefully and with a very, very sober mindset and a very well, to bring it back to the original theme of the video, you don't want to get lost in the story. You don't want to get lost in the drama. You don't want to get lost in your own feelings of indignation and outrage. And you want to remember, through your practice of the yogic concepts that I was talking about in this video, and the harmonizing of energy concepts and of being in the moment, and dropping out of story, that your emotions can become addictive, that we can become addicted to drama, we can become addicted to indignation, we can become addicted to outrage, we can become addicted to being shocked, mortified by the behaviors of another person. And to bring it back to Eckhart Tolle, as he rightly says, if you make the other person wrong, then that feels good to the ego, because if the other person is wrong, then I must be right. And before you know it, you've invested in a situation emotionally in a way that isn't for the highest good of everybody who's concerned. Better to drop the story. Better to drop the drama. Better to drop because emotional flashbacks are cyclical. And emotions are cyclical. And so our emotional responses are cyclical. And sometimes we can get addicted to other people providing us with our own emotional flashbacks. I mentioned this in a video last month. I can't remember what it was called. It wasn't the sad baby video. It was the one that came after that one. I can't remember what it was called, but I think that there is a lot to be said for us recruiting people that inflict our emotional flashbacks back on us, because this is where we derive a sense of self from when we're lost in story. So one of Eckhart Tolle's good concepts that he comes back to again and again is the sense of self and fighting for a sense of self. So whatever your intent is in this situation, come away from the story, drop out of the drama, and just go, okay, what is it I'm trying to get done here? disarming somebody who's an emotional manipulator can be done as quickly as it takes to withdraw your emotional responses, because that's what they're addicted to. So typically, and this is a stupid simplification, please don't quote me on this because it will make me sound like an idiot, but it's useful for the purposes of teaching as a, just like a little linguistic metaphor, to think in a binary sense. Like CPTSD, we can get addicted to our own emotional flashbacks. For the people in the cluster B, what they get addicted to is other people's emotional flashbacks. Please don't quote me on that because it's a silly thing to say. But something close to that happens. They're addicted to inducing emotional responses in other people. So the disarming is, I don't offer you your drug. I don't have any heroin for you today because I'm not in story. So you can't wind me up. You can't make me explode. You can't make me froth at the mouth with righteous indignation for how awful you're being, because I'm not in this story. I'm not invested emotionally in the story. So the disarming is not what you do to them to take their arms away, to de-weaponize them, but what you do is you simply remove your vulnerabilities, you remove your targets, which is not the same thing, but it has the same end result. In martial arts, if I don't give you any targets to strike, it's the same thing as me taking away all your weapons in the end. It's the same end result, net. But one is something I can control and the other isn't. I can't take away your weapons, but I can give you nowhere to land a strike. Okay, ladies and gents, thank you very much for your time and for your attention, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Cheers.